country for his knowledge of direct tax and his great profile by his clear devotion and dedication to the direct tax through his profession, vocation, and sincerity. Dr. Ravi Gupta, who did his graduation and post-graduation from Sri Ram College of Commerce, Delhi, and did law from Delhi University and MBA Finance from Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi, and he completed his PhD from FMS. He was a faculty member of Sri Ram College of Commerce for over 36 years and also has vast practical experience in handling tax matters of trade and industry. He has addressed more than 2,000 seminars on direct tax organized by ICI, Chamber of Commerce, University GTC. He was appointed by the Government of India as a member of the committee constituted for Simplification of Income Tax Act. He is an independent director of many reputed companies, including Varun Beverages, Dharampal Satyapal, and he had been nominated by the government to the Central Council of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and he is also a member of Direct Tax Committee of ICAI. Today he will be addressing our association on the skill in drafting and advancing argument in appeal under the IT Act 1961. There cannot be any better person than him in putting across this particular aspect of the art of the practice, particularly in a time when the appeals have become faceless and the tribunals have become virtual. So we will be a beneficiary of his discourse today, and I request all my members to hear him with rapt attention so as to educate themselves with his knowledge and broaden their base of practice with the knowledge which he will share with you. With these words, I inaugurate this session of the webinar, which is 19th in line of the present webinars in the second phase of the webinars which is being conducted by the Tax Advocate Association of Bengal. Thank you, brothers. Please go ahead.
Back to Sumit. Hello. I welcome Mr. Alok Ghosh.
কে Sumit, আমি বলে দিচ্ছি। Our coordinator, today's coordinator, Alok Ghosh is here. I request him to assist Mr. Ravi Gupta, and we start the webinar right now. Mr. Alok Ghosh, please.
Dada, please unmute. Dada, Alok da, please unmute yourself. Alok da, please unmute yourself. Sound not.
Hello.
ठीक
okay. You are audible. Yes.
First of all, Dr. Gupta, welcome to this TAB seminar. And let me rectify the sayings of Siddhartha Mukhopadhyay. He said that I have to assist you, but probably he is not aware that you do not require any assistance. You itself are a legendary man. So how can I assist you? It is beyond my capacity. At the best, I am eager to hear from you. All we are want to know, learn from you. So
Thank you,
anyway,
Alok. Thank you so much.
I have been asked by Mr. Mukhopadhyay to act as moderator. So everybody who are joining, I welcome all of them on behalf of TAB. And probably you have already heard the background of Dr. Gupta, so he need not require any further introduction. Anyway, I now request Dr. Gupta to continue, to enlighten us.
Thank you, Alok. Thank you so much. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, yes.
Okay. First of all, let me express my gratitude to Advocate S.K. Tulsianji, who is the president of the Tax Advocates Association of Bengal, Advocate Siddharth Mukhopadhyay, this General Secretary, Sumit Gupta ji, who has been coordinating tirelessly for conduct of this webinar today, Advocate Alok ji. I am grateful to the Advocates Association of Bengal to give me this opportunity to be here today with you. Friends, we have been learning through the webinars, through the seminars, and by talking to all of you, whatever knowledge we have gained, we share that knowledge in this webinar. And today the topic assigned to us is regarding drafting and arguments of appeal. In this webinar, we will be discussing only about the first appeal, that is appeal to the CIT appeals. Because this itself is a large topic, it will take about 1.5 hours, and I want that whatever questions you have, we will address those also. And if you would like to take up the topic on appeals before the ITAT, we will do that in a separate webinar. I have a small presentation for you. I will show you that presentation and we'll keep running the discussion. And in between also, if you have any queries, any questions, I think we will take up the presentation in 2 or 3 parts. I'll stop in between so that whatever questions crop up, we will address them as they come up. Let me share this presentation with you. Can the coordinator please make me the co-host so that I can share my presentation? Whoever is coordinating, please.
Issue.
Yes, sir. Advocate.
Debabrata Mukherjee, advocate.
Okay. Can you see this on the screen, please?
Yes.
Okay. So as I told you, we'll be discussing this topic on appeal before Commissioner Income Tax Appeals, which is the first appellate body in the Income Tax Department. Now, before I start with the presentation, who can file an appeal before the Commissioner Income Tax? Obviously, only the assessee can file an appeal before the Commissioner Income Tax, because it is the order passed by the income tax officer, that is the department, against which a person has to go and appeal. So naturally, the department cannot go and appeal against its own order. So when I'm talking about appeals to the Commissioner Appeals, this right is only available with the assessee. The department will never go to the appeal against its own order. Secondly, appeal, we must understand, is not a matter of right. Only when a right to file an appeal has been provided under the statute, only then the assessee can go in for appeal. So under the Income Tax Act also, you will see there is an enabling provision under 2 sections of the Income Tax Act. This is under section 246A and section 248, where a right to file an appeal is given to the assessee. These 2 sections also provide the orders against which the appeal can be filed. Most of these will be covered under section 246A, and there is only one case which is covered under section 248. Generally, whatever appeals we file, whether it be against the assessment order, whether the order is under 143(1), 147, 154, all these are covered under section 246A. I will give you the list of the sections under which appeal lies under section 246A. Section 248 deals with only one specific section where an order is passed by the assessing officer under section 195. 195, as you'll be aware, deals with TDS on payments to non-residents. So if the assessing officer says that you are required to pay tax on the payment made to the non-resident, you want to dispute that, then the appeal is to be filed under section 248. Under section 246A, what are the sections against which appeal can be filed? What are the orders? Right, I have given you the list here. The order passed under section 143(1), that is an intimation which is sent to you when you file with the return of income. An order or an intimation is passed under section 143(1) by the central processing unit. So if any adjustments have been made under section 141 with which you do not agree, then you can file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. Or mostly the appeals are filed under 143(3), where a scrutiny assessment takes place and you are required to, some additions have been made which you do not agree with, then you have a right to file an appeal. If it is a best judgment assessment, ex parte assessment, or an assessment under 147, or even search cases under 153A, 153C, all these are appealable to the Commissioner of Appeals. Whatever searches have taken place up to 31st of March 2021, there the assessments were made under section 153A or 153C. From whatever searches take place on or after 1st of April 2021, then 153A, 153C is no longer applicable. Now these assessments will be made as if there is an income escaping assessment. So these assessments will also be now made under section 147, but still appealable to the Commissioner of Appeals. Similarly, all orders passed under section 154, all penalty orders, any order relating to refund, any order relating to charging of interest on TCS, where a person is held to be an assessee as a representative assessee, he does not agree to that. So these are the major cases where appeal lies to the Commissioner of Appeals. As I told you that only appeal can be filed only when the right is specifically given to you. There are certain orders against which there is no provision for filing appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. For example, an order passed by the AO under section 197(1). 197(1), I apply for a certificate from the AO to deduct tax at source at a lower rate or nil TDS. The AO refuses to grant that to me. There is no appeal provided for that. Right? Similarly, if there is interest charged under section 220, it is not appealable. Right? Order of refusal to grant stay of demand. There is no provision for filing an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. So some of these additions I have mentioned here against which there is no right to file an appeal. Then what does the assessee do? There is no right to file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. So only remedy is go to the High Court, file a writ, and the High Court can grant you relief only in that case. Right? There is no right to file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. Now, practically speaking, when I receive an order from the assessing officer, my suggestion is that first step I should do is prepare a reconciliation of my returned income with the assessed income. If I prepare that reconciliation, it serves a major purpose that I will know what are the additions made or what are the omissions made in the order. See, when an assessment order is passed, some additions are deliberately made by the assessing officer. And there could be some omissions also. Some omissions which may not be apparent from the assessment order. Right? For example, I claimed a deduction which the assessing officer forgets to give me. He does not even discuss that in the assessment order. So there is no mention about that deduction in the assessment order. So if I just read the assessment order and file my appeal, I may not be able to analyze that something is missing. If I prepare a reconciliation, then all these points will emerge from that. Right? I have given you a sample of this. Supposing my return income was 20,50,000 rupees, the assessing officer has assessed the income at 33,70,000. So I must know what are the differences. What is this account on account of? So when I prepare a reconciliation, I find that he has made an addition of 10 lakh rupees under section 68. I have received a loan. He asked me to produce the documents. He is not satisfied with that. He says that the loan is not genuine. So he makes an addition of 10 lakh rupees. I have claimed deduction of 2 lakh rupees on account of commission. He does not agree with that. Sorry. So he does not allow that deduction to be. So this 12 lakh rupees he has mentioned in the assessment order. I can see on the face of it that this 12 lakh rupees has been disallowed. Then I find that in the order, in my return, I had claimed a deduction of 1 lakh rupees under section 80C, which inadvertently the assessing officer has not allowed. He has not given any reasons for not allowing, right? But he has forgotten to give that deduction. So that 1 lakh rupee is also treated as an addition, or there is a totaling error of 20,000 rupees in the assessment order. So there is an addition of 1,20,000 rupees, variance of 1,20,000. Now, what action do I suggest? What should I do? Against the additions which have been made, I will file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Mr. Gupta ji. Gupta ji, please unmute yourself.
गुप्ता जी प्लीज अनम्यूट करें अपने आप को.
Now, am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So against the additions which have been made of 12 lakh rupees, I will definitely file an appeal. Against the mistakes which have been made in the assessment order, I can file an application for rectification under 1. Or I can do both the things. Against these also, I can file the appeal. I can include that also in my grounds of appeal. And I can also file a rectification. As and when the application for rectification is done by the assessing officer, then I can withdraw that from my appeal. So this is what I suggest, that you should first of all prepare a reconciliation of your returned income with the assessed income, so that I become sure about what action I have to take. Just a second. Just excuse me, I'll just come back to you. Machine को there's a small technical issue. Just bear with me. Just give me a minute. Next thing we have to deal with, what is the time limit for filing the appeal? So this time limit is also provided in the Act. This is a very important concept. The appeal is to be filed within 30 days of the date of service of the notice of demand. Right? Remember, it is the date of service of notice. It is not the date of the order. And it is not the date of service of the assessment order. It is the date of service of the notice of demand, which is important. So there might be cases where assessment order has been served upon me, but notice of demand comes to me later. So the limitation period of 30 days starts from the date of service of notice of demand. Or it is 30 days from the payment of tax if the appeal is filed under section 248. Or it is the 30 days from the date on which intimation of the order sought to be appealed against is served. So the period of limitation for filing the appeal given is basically 30 days from the date of service. So I have to be very careful that normally the appeal should be filed within this time period. Supposing I am not able to file an appeal within this 30 days period, right? Then I can file for a condemnation. We'll deal with that later. But in computing this period of 30 days limitation, some period is to be excluded. First of all, the date on which the order complaint is served should be excluded. So if the notice of demand is served to me on, let us say, on the 16th of July, the limitation will start from the 17th of July. So 16th of July is to be excluded. Then if the notice of demand is served without a copy of the order, right, the assessment order is not given to me, only notice of demand is served, then I will wait till the copy of the order is received from me. From that date, I will count the period of 30 days. Then if you will see the new provisions of penalty, which is imposed under section 270A, there is a provision there that if some additions are made to my returned income, I do not file an appeal against that order, and I pay the tax within 30 days, then I can file an application for seeking immunity from penalty. Right? This is under section 270AA. Two conditions to be satisfied. I have not filed the appeal and I have paid the tax within 30 days. Then I can seek an immunity. If the department grants me immunity, fine. Supposing the department does not grant me immunity, then the assessee may like to file an appeal. But then the 30 days period has already elapsed. So therefore, in this case, it is provided that the period starting from the date on which the application for immunity is filed till the date on which the order of rejection is received, this period shall be excluded. So you'll go see that some period is to be excluded while computing the period of 30 days limitation. Now, supposing for some reasons I am not able to file the return with the appeal within 30 days, then what can I do? Then section 249 subsection 3 contains a provision for condonation of the delay in filing the appeal. That is, when I file the appeal, I must enclose with that an application seeking condonation, specifying the reasons why I could not file the appeal within 30 days. And these reasons must be good and sufficient reasons. And as far as possible, when I file an application for seeking condonation, it must be accompanied by an affidavit of the assessee explaining the reasons for the delay. Some of the cases where sufficient cause has been held, right, where appeals have been held to be valid even if filed after 30 days, right, if the quantum of stakes involved and the importance of issues raised are very relevant, right, or if there is a subsequent decision of the Supreme Court or High Court which has resulted in a change of the legal position. When I got the assessment order, there was a High Court ruling against me. So I thought of not filing the appeal. But a few days later, there's a Supreme Court judgment which is in my favor. So now I want to take that benefit of the Supreme Court ruling and I want to file an appeal. So even if 30 days have passed, I can seek condonation and file my appeal. Right? Or there were certain circumstances where I was pursuing some other remedies. Maybe I had gone to the Settlement Commission, but then my settlement application was not entertained. So I might decide to come back to the normal stage. Right? These are other cases, some of the cases where it has been held that the condonation should be allowed and appeals should be entertained. What is the fees that I have to pay? Right? Fees depends upon the quantum of the income assessed. Right? Remember, it is not the quantum of the addition made. The fees that is to be paid for filing the appeal is based upon the total income assessed. So if it is a small case where the income assessed is up to 1 lakh rupees, I pay only 250 rupees. Similarly, 1 lakh to 2 lakh rupees, 500 rupees. About 2 lakhs, I have to pay 1,000 rupees, which is the maximum fees. And if it is related to any other matter, supposing it is for penalty, etc., then the fees is only 250 rupees. Or if it is a case of a loss, I pay only 250 rupees as fees. Now, remember, fees is different from tax. So many times the question is asked, do I have to pay the disputed tax before I file the appeal? No. This is the appeal. The tax payable before filing the appeal is only the tax as per your return. So when you file your return, what was the tax as per your returned income? Only on that you have to pay the tax. That also we will see there are reasons under which the CIT appeal may condone that also. Right? Now, many times we come across cases where assessee says that we have to pay 20% tax before filing the appeal. That is not the correct position. 20% tax I have to deposit to seek a stay of the demand. Recovery of my demand and admission of my appeal are two entirely separate things. So if I have to file an appeal, I do not have to deposit any portion of the disputed tax. Only when I'm seeking a stay of the demand, recovery of the demand, then I might have to pay 20% of the tax. We'll come to that little later. Right? Some of the cases where an appeal should be admitted even without payment of the tax as per the return income. Right? These are where subsequently the assessee might have incurred losses. There is financial instability. My properties have been attached by some other authorities. Right? My bank's account have been seized. So there are some circumstances under which I could not pay the taxes. Then my appeal may be admitted even without payment of the self-assessment tax. The form in which appeal is to be filed. The form remains the same, whether it was a physical appeal electronically to be filed or it is now under the faceless scheme. It is the same form, form number 35 I have to use. And now all appeals have to be filed electronically. Physical filing of appeals is not allowed now. After 2016, all appeals mandatorily to be filed electronically. Now, when I am filing my appeals, I must be very careful that I have filled in all the details correctly. My PAN, name, address, phone number, email address, and all these details which are given in Form 35, I must ensure that they are filled in correctly. Because now all communication to the assessee will be either through your tax portal or through your mail. Right? So it is necessary that all these details are filled in properly in Form 35. The assessment year against in which case the order was passed, I must select that assessment year properly. The section and the subsection under which the order was passed. Supposing the order is passed under section 142.3, I must mention that section. If it is an order under 154, I must mention that. The date of order, date of service of order, these are very important concepts because my period of limitation will start from this date. If there are any other appeals of the same assessee pending before the CIT appeal, I must mention those also in the order, in the appeal, so that they can all be taken up together. Then If the appeal relates to any assessment, I must provide the details of appeal, amount of income assessed, total addition, disallowance, etc. So if you start filling the form, you will see that all these details will be required in the form itself. Right? If there is a delay in filing of the appeal, I must give my grounds for condonation and an application should be accompanied. Two important facts, very important parts of the Form 35 are my statement of facts and my grounds of appeal. These are the main constituents of my appeal. So I have to give my statement of facts and what are my grounds of appeal. Right? My statement of facts should not exceed 1,000 words because all these are now filed electronically. So there is a limitation on the space that I can occupy. So statement of facts must be in 1,000 words maximum, and each ground of appeal must not be in more than 100 words. I will deal with these two facts in detail a little later. These are very important facts. How should I draft my statement of facts and what should be my grounds of appeal? When I am preparing my form number 35, please be careful that special characters like percentage sign, hashtag sign, and sign, star, brackets, all these are not accepted in the electronically filed form 35. If I use any of these anywhere in the form, my appeal will not be, I will not be able to file my appeal electronically. So there will be some error shown. So please ensure that these are not a part of the form. Then the following documents should be enclosed with Form 35. Firstly, the order against which the appeal is being filed, the notice of demand that is served to you. If you are filing an appeal against the assessment order, only these two documents are required. If you are filing an appeal against a penalty order, then the order of penalty should also be included. So then you have to enclose the order of assessment as well as the order of penalty. And of course, the notice of demand, these must be enclosed with the Form 35. Attachments must not exceed 50 MB in size and must be in the PDF format. Right? If these are huge, voluminous, they should be in a zip format. When I'm filing my appeal, it has to be verified through my digital signatures or e-verification code, as the case may be. Right? So if it is an appeal filed by a company, then we must file it through digital signature. Individuals can file it through e-verification also. Now coming to, I told you there are two important things in the Form 35. One is the statement of facts. Now, when I'm preparing my statement of facts, firstly, as I told you, it should not be more than 1,000 words. So I have to be very careful. The facts have to be crisp and clear. Although there is no prescribed format, right? There is no prescribed form in which I have to give my statement of facts. But the statement of facts should only contain the facts of the case. No arguments, no law points, only the facts of the case have to be narrated. For example, I can say the return of income was filed on so-and-so date. Notice under section 148 was issued on so-and-so date. The assessing officer recorded so-and-so reasons and has made so-and-so additions. During the course of assessment, following documents were filed. Right? So according to the facts of each case, I have to narrate those facts. They must be summarized and clear, crisp. They do not need to be argumented. Here I am just giving the brief facts of the case to enable the appellate authority to understand what are the facts which are leading to this appeal. Right? So I must draft my facts in a very proper manner. Right? Again, I'm emphasizing on this, although there is no specific format for drafting grounds of appeals, should be precise, comprehensive, clear, and should be consecutively numbered. Right? Then coming to the grounds of appeal. Right? Again, for the grounds of appeal, there is no standard format. But depending upon what additions have been made, I will have to take a separate ground for each addition. Even on law points, I might like to take a separate ground. For example, if there is a case of a reassessment, income escaping assessment, I might want to challenge the issue of the notice under 148. I might want to challenge the assessment under 148. So instead of each of them, I will take a separate ground. Then whatever additions have been made, on each point, I will take a separate ground. There is no restriction on the number of grounds that I can take. But as I told you, each ground has to be crisp, clear, not more than 100 words. Right? Then there are some grounds which we generally take regarding maybe the principles of natural justice, leave to add grounds at the time of hearing. I'll just give you a format of this, which will make something a little more clear. See, I have given you here some basic grounds that we normally take in an appeal. The first ground says that on the facts and circumstances of the case, the order passed by the learned assessing officer under section 147, 143 is bad both in eyes of law and on facts. So this is a general ground. I would like to take this ground for the simple reason that later on it can help me that if there is something which is not covered specifically in a ground, I will say, sir, I have objected to the assessment. So I can take this as a general ground. Then secondly, I come to the challenge of this order under 147. So I say that on the facts and circumstances of the case and in law, learned assessing officer has erred in initiating the proceedings under 147, as there is no fresh material based upon which the notice has been issued. Now 147 can be challenged on so many grounds. The assessing officer has not recorded proper reasons. He has relied upon borrowed satisfaction. He does not have any fresh material. Right? He has not formed an opinion properly. It is a mere change of the opinion. So all the circumstances of these cases, I can challenge the issue of notice under 147, depending upon the facts of the case. Then coming to the addition which has been made, in ground number 4, I am saying that learned assessing officer has erred on facts in law and making addition of fee so and so under section 68 of the Act, ignoring the facts of the case, as well as the submissions of the assessor. So here I am taking a ground on the addition which has been made. Right? So then there are some general grounds that he has completed the assessment on the basis of assumptions and surmises, ignoring the facts of the case which were placed before him. Then next I am taking without giving an opportunity of being heard. So the order has been passed in violation of principles of natural justice. So this is just a specific specimen I have given to you regarding the grounds of appeal. Depending on the facts of each case, you will have to draft your own grounds. But please be clear, grounds of appeal again have to be very crisp. For each objection, there must be a separate ground. The grounds should not be argumented. You do not have to give your arguments here. Arguments have to be given when the appeal is being contested, when the appeal is being argued. So you will get a chance to give your arguments at that stage. Here you have to only give your objections to the order. On what grounds are you objecting to the order which has been passed? Then coming to another important aspect of stay of demand. See, when an assessment is made or when a penalty is imposed, some demand is created against the assessor. Now, when I file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals, there is no automatic grant of stay of that demand. The department can proceed to recover that demand from the assessor. So what should I do regarding that? Appeal I have filed, that is a separate thing. Whenever there is an outstanding demand, there is a CBDT circular of 2016, which says that if the assessee pays 20% of the disputed demand and the first appeal is pending before the Commissioner of Appeals, then the income tax officer, the income tax authority should grant a stay of the demand. That is, they will not recover the balance amount if you deposit 20% of the tax. However, this 20% is not a hard and fast rule. If you can establish that there are circumstances where 20% is also too huge, right? Where there are what we say high-pitched assessments. You filed a return of 5 lakh rupees, department has assessed it at 5 crore rupees. So there is a demand of about 2 crores, 50 lakhs outstanding against it. And if I'm asked to pay 20% of that, that will be a huge amount. The assessee may not have that money also. So then if you can establish the circumstances, then even 20% should not be insisted. That we had a case of Karnataka High Court in the case of Flipkart, where they said that even 20% may be too high in many cases. So the stay should be granted depending on the facts of each case. Whenever you file an application for stay, it should be normally disposed of within 2 weeks of the filing. This again is a direction from the court, from the CBDT. When you are seeking the stay of the demand, you will have to establish before the assessing officer that there are no funds available with the assessee to deposit that tax. If you have sufficient balances in the bank, if you have liquidity with the liquidity is available with the assessee, then normally department will not grant a stay. They will insist on payment of at least 20%. While granting the stay of the demand, the assessing officer may take an undertaking that the assessee will cooperate in the early disposal of the appeal. Right? Not that you have filed an appeal and you keep seeking adjournment there. You do not want to pursue the appeal for 2 years because you feel that the recovery of the demand has been stayed. The assessing officer may like to review the order after the expiry of a specified period. So he will say, we will grant you stay, but only for 6 months. Then we will review and see whether you should be granted further stay or not. Whatever future refunds are due to this SC, of course, the department will adjust that against your outstanding demand, even if stay has been granted. Once an appeal has been filed, does the assessee have a right to withdraw that appeal? Can you say that I filed the appeal, I do not want to pursue it, please, I will withdraw the appeal? Well, this is not a matter of right. Once you have filed an appeal, your entire assessment is open before the CIT appeal. He may or may not allow you to withdraw the appeal. We will see a little later that when you file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals, he does not have only the power to grant you relief. He also has a power of what we say enhancement of the assessment. You filed an appeal of, you filed a return of 5 lakh rupees, assessing officer made additions of 7 lakh rupees, he has assessed at 12 lakh. When you file an appeal, Commissioner feels that the AO has not made certain additions. So he can even enhance the assessment from 12 lakh to 20 lakh rupees. So therefore, once an appeal has been filed before the Commissioner appeals, then the entire assessment is open before him. And therefore, withdrawal of appeal is not a matter of right. If you want to withdraw the appeal, you will have to file an application with the CIT appeal. Having regard to the circumstances of the case, he may or may not allow you to withdraw the appeal. What happens if my appeal is found to be defective? Right? Supposing I filed my Form 35, there are some defects there. Some facts have not been mentioned in the Form 35. There are certain omissions. Then what will happen? Will my appeal be rejected? Well, there are a lot of decisions which say no, appeal should not be rejected on prima facie. the assessee must be given a right or an opportunity to remove that defect. So whatever defect is there, the CIT appeal or his office will intimate that defect to the assessee, give them a reasonable time to remove that defect. If that defect is removed within that time, then the appeal should be considered as a valid appeal. Now, before I come to further discussion, I think we will give a small pause here. And if anyone has any questions on what we have discussed till now, we can take up those questions. So the moderator, if you have received any questions, first let us deal with them. Otherwise, then we will proceed with the further discussion. Alokji, do you have you received any queries, any questions, any participant has any questions till what we have discussed till now?
Sir, I have some question. Please.
Sir, I have some question to you, sir.
Yes, we can.
Sir, regarding the limitation for filing appeal, recently the circular 10 of 2021 has been issued by the CBDT in view of the writ application, suo motu application filed by the Supreme Court. What is your opinion regarding that? If any assessee cannot file his appeal within due time, then shall he be eligible for filing this appeal in view of this circular? And at the time of filing appeal, whether he has to file any continuation petition or not, or he can quote the circular 10 of 2021.
See, when you file, sir, when you file the appeal, you will find in Form 35 itself, there is a column mentioned, is there a delay in filing the appeal?
Yes.
If there is a delay, then the reason for the delay is to be given in that Form 35 itself. So therefore, as a matter of abundant caution, you must mention the reason for the delay and seek condonation in spite of the circular.
Shall I quote the circular also?
You can. You may quote that circular, but
actually the department has already given the circular that the view of the Supreme Court shall be taken care of regarding the limitation.
See, that was under these special circumstances of the corona pandemic.
Yes, yes.
So in view of that, the Supreme Court had given you extension. So that is a separate thing, that they have extended the time period itself. So the time period of filing the appeal has been extended.
Yes.
So then that is not a case of condonation. Right? That is an extension of the due date.
So apart from quoting circular, we have to file the continuation petition also.
If there is condonation. See, if there is delay beyond that period, then I have to file that application.
Okay.
If there are any other questions till this stage, otherwise we will continue.
Please go ahead, sir. There's no question in this chat box.
Okay, okay.
Sir, in case of high pitch demand,
Yes.
in case of high pitch demand, the high pitch demand made by the assessing officer,
Yes.
and from stay from the recovery of demand, I have to request to the assessing officer for lowering the demand.
Okay. See, whenever there is a demand, whether it is against a high-pitched assessment or a normal assessment, the stay application is to be filed to the assessing officer. If the assessing officer does not grant the stay, then you can approach the higher authority. You can go to the additional commissioner, you can go to the commissioner for seeking a relief. If, let us say, no one grants you the stay, then in that case, you can approach the High Court along with evidence that I have approached everyone in the department, no one is giving me relief, then the High Court may also entertain your application. But first, exhaust all your remedies, go to the assessing officer, go to the additional commissioner, go to the commissioner. If they do not grant the stay, then go to the High Court.
So filing, appeal filing time is 30 days, but in the present scenario, in the new portal is functioning, but appeal is not filing. So what remedies can be taken?
So in that case, you will see that the CBDT has already extended the time, that whenever the time was expiring until 1st of June, they have already extended that till 30th of September. So they have already granted the extension of the date for filing the return, filing the appeals. And if we find that even up to August end, the portal is not functioning, you are not able to file the appeals, the department will extend it further. Right? The CBDT, Ministry of Finance, all are aware about the problems in the portal, and they are aware that SSC is not being able to file the appeals. So whatever reasonable extension is to be required, they will grant you that extension.
Sir,
Apart from that,
can we wait till that day for from payment of 20% payment from stay of demand? Can we-
See, you can say at present, my experience says that they are not pressing for the demand. So once they are extending the time period for filing the appeal, they will automatically extend the period for recovery also. Right? So you can wait for payment of 20% also.
Thank you.
apart from that, sir, another ground for filing appeal is that either it is to be filed through digital signature or EVC. If the SEC is not having the EVC facility, they can file the appeal through digital signature. But
Yes.
now in the income tax portal, the digital signature for the partnership firm or for any other, say
So
for
company,
example,
etc.,
cooperative
yes.
society is not functioning.
Yes.
So it is
So
also another ground that the appeal is they cannot file the appeal within the 2 months.
yes, yes. See, as I told you, at present, the time period has already been extended till 30th of August. Right?
Yes.
If you are not able to do it by 30th of August also, if the portal is not working, they will extend it further.
Okay.
Right? So we keep bringing all these problems before the relevant authorities. They are also aware of this, and SSC will not be suffering on account of non-working of the portal. So sufficient time will be granted.
Actually, in the grounds of appeal, another question is in the grounds of appeal, there is a system for quoting the section. And you have quoted that the general plea that we can add any other evidences at the time of hearing. And under which section we have to quote this?
So see now,
Previously, when we were filing the appeal, actually, sir, I am trying to interrupt you. Previously, when we were filing the appeal in a physical format, it was not problem. Now, in the grounds of appeal, you have to quote under which section you are raising the grounds of
then
appeal.
in this case, you can take section 142, where you can quote
143, sir.
142, because 142 also says that assessing officers should confront whatever evidence they have to the assessee. If that has not been filed, then there is a violation of principles of natural justice. So 143.2 you can mention there. Under this, I am filing this ground.
Yes, okay.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, is there any limitation for withdrawing the appeal petition?
For
Withdrawing the appeal petition?
no, any time before the appeal is decided, you may decide to withdraw it. You can file an application to the Commissioner of Appeals, and if he thinks it proper, he may allow you to withdraw it.
Okay.
Any time before it is decided.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Two questions are in the chat box.
Hmm.
One is by Advocate A. Chaudhary.
Hmm.
Sir, if a scrutiny is open under section 147, read with section 148, and the assessing officer had not given any reason for reopening even after filing the return, then what is the remedy available?
See, then the remedy available to you, sir, is go to the High Court, challenge the issue of 148, and then the courts will direct the assessing officer to give you the reasons. Because there is a Supreme Court judgment, GK and Drive Shaft, where it has been clearly held that when a notice under 148 is issued and the assessee has filed the appeal, he requests for the reasons, it is mandatory for the assessing officer to give those reasons. If he does not give those reasons and proceeds to make the assessment, in many cases, the assessment has been held to be invalid. So you will have two options at this stage: either wait for him to complete the assessment and then challenge it, or at this stage itself, go to the court and seek remedy from the High Court. So whatever suits you, you can take either of these two options.
So next question is from Mr. Ketan Santhalia. When assessed tax is multiple times more than the returned income, whether the stay of demand is automatic in view of old CBDT circular.
No, sir, stay of demand is never automatic. You will have to prove the circumstances. But normally when it is a high-pitched assessment, the assessing officer will grant you a stay even without payment of 20% of the tax. Otherwise, if they do not grant you the stay, only remedy is file a writ before the High Court.
Okay,
But
sir.
normally, if it is a high-pitched assessment, the department does not insist on payment of even 20%.
Thank you, sir. No more
But
questions.
the question is the officer who made the high pitch demand, he himself lowering the demand. But
No,
the
he will
same
not.
person,
He will.
same
He will.
person.
No, he will not lower the demand. He will only postpone the recovery of the demand. So he will only grant you a stay that instead of 20%, you pay 5% today. After 6 months, you pay another 5%. So he can grant you payment in installments also, right? Till the time that your appeal is decided. Or you can make an application to the Commissioner Appeals. Now, I do not know whether that will be possible under the faceless assessment. There is no procedure for filing an application for early hearing. Otherwise, we were filing an application to the Commissioner to decide my appeal on a priority basis because it is high pitched. But now we do not have that facility. So I'll have to seek stay of the demand from the assessing authorities only. Right?
Okay, sir. You proceed, sir.
Right. Now coming to some other important facts when I am in appeal before the Commissioner of Appeals. Firstly, regarding filing of additional evidence before the Commissioner of Appeals. See, when we are before the assessing officer, it is the duty of the assessee to file all evidence before the assessing officer upon which he wants to rely upon. Right? For example, there are certain unsecured loans. The assessing officer has asked you to justify the genuineness of the loan. So at that stage, what is the onus of the assessee? He must file the confirmation. Three things are essential. He must establish the identity of the person. He must establish the genuineness of the transaction. Right? And he must establish the capacity of the person who has given the loan. To satisfy these three conditions, whatever documents you have, you must file them at the stage of the assessing officer. Right? That is the primary law. If you have not been able to file it before the assessing officer, can you file any additional evidence before the Commissioner Appeals? Right? Now, there is a rule given here, Rule 46A, which will enumerate 4 circumstances under which the assessee can file the additional evidence before the Commissioner. Right? So there is a possibility of filing the additional evidence before CIT appeal. There is no prescribed format for filing that evidence. I'll show you a sample copy of that also. Now, let me show to you the circumstances under which the additional evidence can be filed. Right? These are the 4 circumstances. Firstly, where the assessing officer has refused to admit the evidence which ought to have been admitted. Right? Supposing I have taken a loan from a party, before the assessing officer wanted me to establish that genuinity, I took that person to the assessing officer. मैंने उसको कहा, sir, please record a statement. He will confirm that he has given the loan to me. So that is also an evidence which I wanted to produce before him. Assessing officer says, no, I will not record that statement. So then the assessing officer has refused to admit my evidence. I wanted to file an affidavit before the assessing officer. Assessing officer does not accept it. So then, first case is where the AO has refused to accept my evidence, then I can file it for the first time before the Commissioner. Secondly, where the appellant was prevented by sufficient cause from producing the evidence which he was called upon to produce by the assessing. So assessing officer asked me to produce a confirmation from the party. I wrote a letter to that party He took 10 days time to reply to me. In that 10 days time, the assessing officer has completed the assessment. Right? So I did not get sufficient opportunity to file that evidence. So then in those circumstances also, I can file my additional evidence before the commissioner. Right? Where the appellant was prevented by sufficient cause from producing the evidence which is relevant for any ground of appeal. Right? Similar to that. And fourthly, where the AO has made the order without giving sufficient opportunity to adduce additional evidence. Right? On the 25th of March, the assessing officer issues a notice to me. Please produce so and so, so and so, so and so documents. And on the 27th, he completes the assessment. So within 2 days of having issued a notice to me, he has completed the assessment. So I did not have proper time to furnish all the evidence that I wanted to rely upon. So if I fall under any of these four circumstances, then I can file that evidence before the commissioner. What will the commissioner of appeals do now? He will take that evidence along with my application, along with the circumstances under which I fall, and give a copy of that to the assessing officer and ask for his comments upon those documents. So assessing officer will get an opportunity to examine these documents, my evidences, and he will send his report to the CIT appeals. CIT appeal will give that again to the assessee, seek his comments, and then pass it on. So in this case, both the parties should get an opportunity to examine those documents. Here I have given you a sample copy of how I file an application for additional evidence. Although there is no prescribed format, but this is the letter that we have drafted. Right? The facts of the case you have to mention briefly, then come to the point that it is requested to accord kind permission for production of additional evidences as the assessee was not provided proper opportunity of being heard. So you have to establish before the assessing officer under which of these four parameters do you fall to file the additional evidence. Give the additional evidence as a separate paper book. And then there are certain case laws which we rely upon where it is held that normally the commissioner appeals should admit the additional evidence. Right? So just mention 2-3 cases here and make your application under section 46A. Right? Depending on the facts of the case, you can modify this application and include the facts. Then coming to another aspect of filing of additional grounds before the CIT. When I filed my original appeal in Form 35, I have taken certain grounds. When the appeal comes up for hearing, then I find that there are some grounds which I have not taken in the original appeal, but I want to take up now. Maybe because of the change of circumstances, maybe because of new decisions, some facts have crept up which I want to take as an additional. Can I do that? Right, again, section 250 subsection 5 provides that at the time of hearing the appeal, the CIT appeal has the power to allow the appellant to go into any ground of appeal not specified in the original appeal. So power is there with the CIT appeals, he has to exercise that power. So I have to again make an application to the Commissioner of Appeals that these are the additional grounds which I could not take up earlier, on which I want to rely. So I will file my additional grounds. And if these additional grounds go to the root of the matter, are very important for deciding the matter, then CIT appeal must admit them. Right? For example, in penalty, there were some recent judicial decisions which said that when a penalty notice is issued, there are two limbs under which penalty can be imposed, either for concealment of income or furnishing of inaccurate materials. Both these limbs are mentioned in the penalty notice. If the assessing officer does not strike off one of them, he does not specify what is your offense, then the notice has been held to be invalid. So if I have filed an appeal against the penalty, I have not taken this ground because these decisions were not available that particular. When I come across these decisions, I think that I should take this ground also. Therefore, I can make an application for admission of additional grounds of appeal. Here again, I have given a draft of a prayer for admission of additional grounds. So depending on your facts and circumstances, depending upon what grounds you want to take, you will have to draft your application. But yes, you can take up additional grounds before the Commissioner of Appeals. This has also been decided by the Supreme Court in National Thermal Power case, which I have quoted here. Right? I'll share this presentation with you so that you can keep this as a record, and whenever required, you can take these as a basic and modify them accordingly. Then what is the procedure that is followed in hearing the appeal? So normally when the appeal is fixed, you receive a notice from the Commissioner of Appeals. Nowadays also, when it is faceless, the notice is being sent on the portal or through the email. You receive the notice and you have to upload your submissions. When you are uploading the submissions, we would prefer that the submissions are uploaded in the form of a paper. Right? What is a paper book? It is basically a compilation of your written submissions as well as the documents upon which you want to rely. Right? If you are saying that I have filed all these documents before the assessing officer, attach a copy of that so that the CIT appeal can go through. They should be serially numbered for easy reference of the Commissioner. I'll give you a format of that also. So we must first of all prepare a paper. Then at the time and place of hearing, nowadays there is no place of hearing, it is all on the system itself. Right? Can I now ask for an opportunity of a personal hearing? Right? Earlier we know that we used to go to the Commissioner of Appeals and present our case verbally before him. But in the faceless appeal, this is not possible. However, we can, when making a submission, request for a personal hearing. Now this personal hearing will not be face-to-face, but they are devising a system where I can argue my appeal personally, although that person may be able to see my face, but I do not know who is hearing it. That is why it is called faceless. But they will hear me, give me an opportunity, and then they will decide the. Then, as I told you, at the time of hearing, you may like to go in for certain additional grounds of appeal. Then the order is passed by the Commissioner of Appeals. Nowadays, the new procedure which has been mentioned, you would have gone through that. Under the new procedure, your appeal is first heard by what they call appeal unit. So your appeal is assigned to one appeal unit, which definitely will not be in the city where your appeal lies. So if it is, let us say, an appeal filed in Calcutta, the appeal unit will not be in Calcutta. Someone else will be there. Maybe in Guwahati, maybe in Bangalore. So some other appeal unit will be assigned. That appeal unit consisting of the Commissioner of Appeals will pass a draft order. This draft order will be sent to the National Appeal Center. The National Appeal Center then, depending on the quantum of addition, the quantum of assessment, decide whether they want to refer it to another appeal unit. If it is a huge case, they will definitely refer it to a second appeal unit. Second appeal unit will review that order and send their comments to the National Appeal Center. Then the National Appeal Center take into consideration both the observations of the two appeal units, then they will pass the appeal. So now this is not an appeal to be decided by one Commissioner of Appeals. It is to be decided by a collective authority. That authority is called the National Appeal Center. Depending upon what appeal unit 1, appeal unit 2, whatever they have said, depending upon that, the National Appeal Center will pass the order. How far this is valid in law, we do not know. There are many challenges to this scheme which have not yet been decided by the High Courts. See, because normally, traditionally, we have been saying that Commissioner Appeals is an independent body. They must decide it independently. Now here there is no question of independence. It has to be decided by a collective of people. So therefore, this is still subject to judicial scrutiny. This is the format of the paper book I am giving to you. Right? For example, my submissions, my written submissions are contained in 1 to 18 pages. Then whatever are the reasons recorded under 148, I have given that. Copy of the original order dated so-and-so is given. All the other documents are enclosed in this paper. So they have been serially numbered. This will be easy for the CIT appeal to refer to this. Secondly, if I have to go and appeal to the tribunal also, this will be helpful there also. I have prepared the paper book. All documents are there in this paper. Then we will attach a certificate here, certified that all documents in the above paper book were before the assessing office. So here I am certifying that there is no additional evidence. If there is additional evidence, then give that in the form of another paper book number 2. Along with an application for additional evidence, file all the additional evidence separately. Otherwise, if you have nothing else to file, you are relying upon the original documents, one paper book is sufficient. Then what is the binding effects of various judgments of the CIT appeal? Now we know that decisions of Supreme Court are binding on all courts in India. All judicial authorities are bound by any decision of the Supreme Court. So therefore, legally speaking, Commissioner Appeals is bound by the judgment given by the Supreme Court. Although we have seen in many cases where, for one pretext or the other, the CIT appeal may try to wriggle out even from the decision of a Supreme Court. He will say that the facts of the case are separate, or so and so, and he may cite some other judgments and try to wriggle. But the legal position is, if there is a Supreme Court judgment on the facts of your case, that is binding on the CIT. All judgments of the jurisdictional High Court as well as the IT are binding on the CIT. If there is a judgment of another High Court and there is no judgment contrary to that of the jurisdictional High Court, even the judgment of the other High Court should be binding on the Commissioner. Right? If there are various conflicting decisions of courts of coordinated jurisdiction, the latter decision in period of time is to be preferred if reached after consideration of the earlier decision. That we see many cases where one decision was given maybe in the year 1990. After that, in the year 2005, a decision comes from another High Court where they have considered the earlier decision and given a contrary view. Then the later judgment which is there should be prevalent and should be binding. If there are judgments on the SSC for the earlier years and the facts are the same, for the same SSC, in earlier years, some appeals have been decided, then those should be taken as a precedent for that SSC also. Right? So I have to keep this in mind. I have to argue it in that manner. As I was mentioning that earlier we used to file an application for early hearing. Wherever there was a huge demand, I would file an application for early hearing. I would request the SSC also to submit an application to the commissioner so that the appeal could be decided on an early basis. But now under the faceless appeal scheme, we do not have any such scheme where I can make an application for early hearing. Now coming to this very important power of enhancement, as I was mentioning, I had mentioned this earlier also, that when you file an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals, your entire assessment is open before him. He has a power to grant you relief, and he also has a power to enhance your assessment. So if there are certain additions which have been made by the AO, the Commissioner Appeals finds that the additions are not proper, there should have been higher additions, he is authorized after giving notice to you to even enhance those additions. Right? So he may confirm, reduce, or enhance the assessment, or he can annul the assessment. Nowadays, the Commissioner Appeals does not have the power to set aside the assessment for fresh case. Right? So he cannot refer it back to the assessing officer. He can only call for a remand report and decide that issue. The power of set aside now is there with the tribunal only. So tribunal can set it aside, not the Commissioner Appeals. There are some judicial decisions on the power of enhancement where it has been held that the power of enhancement is an absolute power, and in all circumstances the CIT can enhance your income. These are some of those cases I mentioned here, and in some cases which are in favor of the SAC, it has been held that although the Commissioner of Appeals has the power to enhance, but only on those points on which additions were already made by the AO. He cannot make an addition on a new source of income. So these are some judgments which are there in favor of the assessor. Right, which says the CIT appeal cannot enhance income of an SSC on an altogether new source. Then there are some theories, some concepts which we can take advantage of while arguing our appeals before the Commissioner of Appeals. One of them is called a peak theory. Now, what is the peak theory? Now, supposing my books of accounts are found or some documents are found where there are some debit entries, some credit entries. So normally what the assessing officer will do is, he will say that all deposits in this account are your unexplained investment, all withdrawals are unexplained expenditure. So he will make addition of both the things. There are deposits of 70 lakh rupees, there are withdrawals of 68 lakh rupees. So he will make addition of both the things. Right now, when I'm in appeal, I can take advantage of what is called the peak theory. I can say that all the withdrawals are out of the deposits, deposits are out of the withdrawals. Whatever is the peak amount, only that should be taken as my income. I had deposited 10 lakh rupees, I have withdrawn 9 lakh rupees and again deposited 8 lakhs. So I'll say this 8 lakhs is out of the 9 lakhs which I withdrew. Similarly, then out of 8 lakh rupees, I have withdrawn 7 lakh 50,000, again deposited 7 lakhs. So I can explain my deposits through the withdrawals. Right? This is called the peak theory. When I'm taking advantage of the peak theory, I must admit that these are my accounts, these are my deposits, these are my withdrawals. Then you will be given the benefit of being taxed only on the peak amount, not the entire deposit, not the entire withdrawal. If these deposits and withdrawals spread over a number of years, then how do I make that addition? Right? That also I have illustrated here. But supposing there were the peak of the deposits was 35 lakh rupees in all. So this account runs over 4 years. And the peak deposit, that is the highest amount available in that bank account at a particular point of time, was 35 lakhs. Because it spreads over 4 years, first year I will calculate the peak, which was 20 lakhs. I will make addition of 20 lakhs. Next year, the peak comes to 30 lakhs, out of which 20 lakhs I have already added. So I will make addition only of 10 lakhs in the second year. Third year, the peak amount is 15 lakhs. I have already made an addition of 30 lakhs, so nothing will be added here. And fourth year, peak is 35 lakhs. I have made additions of 30 lakhs, so I will make addition of 5 lakhs. So if the peak of all the 4 years is 35 lakhs, the total addition will be 35 lakhs spread over 4 years. Right? So I can take advantage of this concept of peak theory when I am preparing my appeal. Another important aspect which I can take benefit of is what we call telescoping. So what is telescoping? Many cases we come across where some additions have been made in the earlier years against which I might not have filed an appeal. Right? Supposing some expenses were disallowed in the earlier years on the ground that they are personal in nature, they are unvouched, or arbitrary additions have been made, maybe 50,000 rupees, 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakhs. My expenses have been disallowed, against which I did not file the appeal. And let us say over the last 5-6 years, these additions have amounted to about 50 lakh rupees. In this year, there is some undisclosed investment found, which is of 40 lakh rupees. So department makes that addition in this year. Under this theory of telescoping, I can make a claim that this 40 lakh rupees is out of the income which has been assessed in the earlier years, against which I did not file my appeal. I have paid the taxes on that addition. So that in fact represents my income. Right? So that income was available with me. This investment is out of that income only. This is called the principle of telescoping. So I can explain my source of investment of this year out of my additions made in the earlier year, against which I did not file an appeal. These have been held, this theory, in various Supreme Court judgments also. I have given here for your reference. Nowadays, we are coming across a lot of cases where there is what we call a double addition. Especially these cases of demonetization period, where assessee has declared some sales which were made in cash. During the demonetization period also, or some period earlier to demonetization, he claims that I have made cash sales and therefore my cash deposited in the bank account is out of my cash sales. These sales have been included in his P&L account. His profit and loss account, balance sheet have been audited. And he has shown a good gross profit ratio also. Now, when the cases come for scrutiny, assessing officer finds that so much cash was deposited during the demonetization period, he does not accept your theory that this was cash sales, and he makes the addition of the entire amount of cash. Is that justified? Now, firstly, in this case, he has not rejected your books of accounts. You have already shown this as your sale. Your accounts have been audited. So where was the reason of suspect that he did not accept that as a cash sale? Even if he makes the addition of the amount of cash deposited, is this not a double addition? I have already shown that amount as my cash sales. I have paid the tax on that. And again, he is making an addition. So in this case also, there are various court decisions which have said that double addition on the same basis is not permissible. So I cannot add my income twice. Right? One of the cases which we were recently handling, a person had taken some profits from a commodity exchange. He had declared that in his profit and loss account. Maybe about 50 lakh rupees was profit on account of trading in commodities. He declares that, pays the tax on that. Subsequently, the department receives information that the person from whom I had received that income is nothing but an entry operator. He's an accommodation provider. So what the department did was issued me a notice under 148, again assessed my income and made that addition again. He said, you have taken entry from an entry operator. We have recorded his statement. He says that he is only an accommodation provider. So therefore, this should be treated as unexplained money in your hands. Now, what is it? Is it not double addition? I have already declared that as my income. You are again added that as my income. So this is what we call is double addition. So there are various court decisions which have held that double addition is not permissible. So I should take advantage of this. These were some of the concepts which are prevailing today. So I wanted to highlight these. I think this is something like the e-appeal proceedings. I have just mentioned to you that now all appeals we file electronically, all proceedings will be in the faceless manner. They have specified that scheme of the faceless assessment. This is what I've told you, the National Faceless Assessment Center, the Regional Faceless Assessment Centers, there are various appeal units. So this is all the procedural part. Right? You can go through this. This is nothing but the procedure which has been mentioned. I have dealt with that. These are the various appeal units. Whatever we were doing earlier, admitting additional grounds, making inquiries, all these powers are available with the appeal units. At present also, they can call for a remand report, etc., from the assessing officer. I will not take much time on this. I think we can devote time to any questions that you have. This presentation I will share with you. This is all the procedure mentioned in the National Appeal Center. This is, I told you that even in the faceless appeal procedure, you have an opportunity of asking for personal hearing. This notification was issued in 2020. While you are making your submissions, you should make a specific request that an opportunity of personal hearing should be granted to you. I think that is all that I have to present to you. Any questions that we have, any queries, I think we will be pleased to take up that.
Sir, regarding the additional evidence under Rule 46A, in the appeal in Form 35, we have to mention the documents upon which we are relying upon for additional evidences.
Yes.
Say, for example, if the assessee skips any document at the time of filing appeal, can he take the plea at the time of hearing before the CIT appeal?
Yes, yes, at the time of hearing also you can file those documents.
Okay.
Along with an application for additional evidence, you can file that even at the time of hearing.
And regarding this double addition, I have one query that if the assessee is having unaudited accounts and the case has been selected for demonetization period, during the demonetization period, and if his books is rejected, but the profit has been calculated from business and profession on the basis of the sale quantum, can he get the benefit for that? The
Yes.
plea of double addition?
See, even if your accounts are not audited, but the assessing officer has relied upon those accounts only in determining your profit.
Yes.
Right? And then he is making addition, one on your income and secondly on account of the cash deposited.
Yes.
Then it amounts to a double addition.
Yes. Okay.
Right? Because income also, the cash that I deposited, that also comprises of my income. So either tax my income or tax my cash deposit. You cannot tax both of them.
Yes. Okay.
Sir, when appeal is to the CIT appeal, then appellate team can dispose the appeal petition or can take the hearing. Appellate team. When appeal to the CIT appeal,
Yes.
then appellate team can dispose or can take the hearing of the appellate.
No, see, now the procedure is you do not know who is hearing your appeal. You do not know who is verifying your appeal. So notice is issued to you from the National Faceless Appeal Center. And you make your submissions, you file your submissions online, and then they will mark it to some appeal unit which you are not aware of. So all that is their internal working.
Sorry, sir. So
Yes.
all the appellate team members should be the level of CIT.
All of them are CIT appeals.
Yes, sir. That's why. That's why I'm asking.
All of them are of the level of CIT appeals. No one junior to them.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, in case of request for personal hearing, I have to request to the CIT appeals.
Yes, when you are making your submissions to the National Faceless Appeal Center, you have to file an application that I wish to get a personal, an opportunity of personal hearing. What is the procedure of personal hearing? They have yet not specified. So we have not come across any case where this opportunity has been given. In fact, we have filed the written submissions in about 40-50 cases, but no further proceeding has taken place as yet.
Sir, here lies the question that I am the appellant.
Right?
CIT appeal is the respondent.
Right. No, CIT appeal is not the respondent. The ITO is the respondent.
ITO is the respondent. Acha.
Yes. I am filing an appeal to the Commissioner of Appeals. Commissioner of Appeals is the adjudicating authority. So my appeal is against the order of the assessing officer. The assessing officer is the respondent.
Yes, so the respondent has the authority to assess my submission whether personal hearing will be allowed or not.
No, no. As I told you, the Commissioner of Appeals, the appellate authority, has the power to decide that. That again is subject of challenge before the high courts, whether it should be discretionary or it should be mandatory. If I make a request for personal hearing, is it mandatory upon the Commissioner of Appeals to allow that or not? The present scheme says it is the discretion of the CIT appeals. But courts have not taken a very lenient view of that, and they have still not passed a judgment whether it is mandatory or it is discretionary.
Yes, yes. Sir, in a peak theory or the telescoping concept of telescoping, is there any legal sanctity or it is customary on the part of the department?
No, I have given you certain case laws where it has been upheld, where it has been held that these benefits should be given to the SSC. So you have to make a claim for this in the appellate proceedings, cite the relevant case laws, then they will be giving that benefit to you.
So this benefit is given on the appeal from the appellate.
Yes, of course, it is for the appellate authority, the CIT appeals to decide that. If they do not allow you, you have to go to the tribunal.
Any question there are?
অলগা তুমি জিজ্ঞেস করো।
Well, if we do not have any further questions, then
Am I audible?
yes, yes.
Now, in respect to introduction of faceless assessment, I have come across several queries from different junior advocates as well as few of my clients that despite filing appeal in 2017 and the appeal hearing was conducted since 17 to 2019, no order was passed. Thereafter, one notice was issued by Faceless Assessment Authority and it was complied with. And after that, Jurisdictional Commissioner of Appeal in Calcutta had issued one notice rather, asking to appear personally before him and to conclude the case. So now the question is, it was complied before Faceless Assessing Authority in several cases. We have seen it.
Sir, now faceless, all appeals have been transferred to the Faceless Appellate Center, excepting the appeals pertaining to search and seizure or appeals pertaining to international taxation. So if your appeal pertains to any search and seizure matter, then you will get a notice from the Commissioner of Appeals for a personal hearing. It will be decided by the Commissioner of Appeals on a personal hearing basis, or if it relates to any international transaction. Otherwise,
none of the cases are covered within these two parameters.
So then no appeal can be decided by any Commissioner of Appeals except the Faceless Appeal Center.
But in at least 10 to 11 cases, I have seen that they have passed the order.
They passed the order?
Yes. And it
Or
has
they have
already been communicated.
Or they have issued the notices only?
No. They have issued notice and they have also after completing the order, communicated it to the SSC.
No. I think that is an invalid order. No CIT appeal has now got the power to make any order. Once this faceless appeal was notified, after that, no commissioner appeals can pass an order on physical hearing basis.
But I have come across one notification issued by CBDT that CIT appeal, jurisdictional CIT appeal may conclude the hearing proceedings personally in some cases, not under two parameters. As they have issued, CBDT has issued one circular.
No, please give a reference to that circular if you can. If you have that circular, please let us know.
Definitely, I will.
I have not come across any circular. In Delhi, at least, I have not seen any appeal being decided by the Commissioner of Appeals in a physical manner.
No, in Calcutta, at least 10 to 12 cases have been completed.
Okay, that will be good knowledge for us. Please share that circular. Let us also see that.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you.
One more question in the chat box. All of them, please return.
Can you please read that question from the chat box?
Recovery proceedings already started by the authority, and CIT appeal dismissed ex parte order 5 years back. No ITIT appeal pending from the dismissal order. Is the SSC has any scope to prefer an appeal before ITIT and any scope of stay order against recovery proceeding? This is the question.
Okay. See, appeal, as you said, was decided 5 years ago. The SSC has been sleeping over the matter, has not gone to the ITIT. So now after 5 years, when he receives the notice for recovery of demand, he gets up and now wants to file an appeal to the tribunal. Can he do that? Now see, when you go to the tribunal and you seek condemnation, there is a provision for seeking condemnation before the tribunal also. But there you have to explain the delay on a daily basis.
Yes, exactly.
So on a day-to-day basis, you have to explain that why did you not file an appeal for 5 years together? So unless and until you have solid grounds for that, you were medically ill, you were hospitalized, you were not physically fit to file the appeal. So if you can prove those circumstances, then only the ITAT may admit your appeal. Otherwise, 5 years is too long a period to seek condemnation. And then your appeal has been decided by the CIT appeal. It has been rejected ex parte. So there is no reason for seeking the stay of demand also. So unless and until you have very solid reasons to get your delay condoned by the ITAT, then file an application for stay before the ITAT, and they might grant you a stay there. So it will be a very difficult task for you to seek that condemnation.
Another question has been raised by one advocate. He says that when assessed tax is multiple times more than the returned income, whether the state demand is automatic in view of old CBDT circular.
It is discussed already.
We have discussed
already.
this.
Sorry.
Only question left from it.
No more further question in chat box.
Okay,
Anybody is having any question?
Okay then. Then Mr. Alok, if you can give me a mail address, I will mail this presentation, and I think it can be used by all the participants for their future reference. And if there are any further queries, you can always mail it to me. My mail address will be given in the presentation. So you can mail any queries to me, and I'll be pleased to reply to any of them.
And definitely I am going to send you the notification, the CBDT circular.
Yes. I will see what is that, and we will give
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Because it is very much harassing for us.
Should be. See, either they should be physical or there is faceless. They cannot be both proceedings going on together.
Yes, in all the cases I have seen that both the notices are it is issued by Faceless Center, and it has also been issued by CIT Appellate Authority, jurisdictional CIT Appellate Authority. So this cannot be done.
No. In Delhi, it is not happening, definitely. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Alok, and thank you all the participants for a very patient hearing. And
We also thank you for your beautiful presentation, sir.
Thank
Definitely,
you.
it would be helpful.
okay.
Sumit
Thank you,
Gupta
Mr.
will,
Alok.
Sumit Gupta will give you the mail number and
Yeah.
you share it to Sumit Gupta.
Yes.
And it will be distributed to us through
Right.
our YouTube channel and also to our Facebook.
Okay. Thank you, friends. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Gupta বেরিয়ে গেছেন